Hi everybody, this is Lorraine Alternative Homesteading. It's 1:45 a.m., October 17, 2023. This is a really interesting topic, one that I'm sure that you will appreciate knowing more about. So anyway, we all know that on Quora, there are a lot of infiltrators and agents and stalkers and corrupt cops and everybody trying to discredit the information that's being put out there. But there are some good people out there, people who are writing books. Just one such person's name is Bruce Wray. Bruce K. Wray. He is a former ebook author called Paradigm Shift the Author, Paradigm Shift Government and Law Enforcement Evidentiary Through the Wall Crime. Interesting, huh? Through the wall crime. So he responded to a question that was posted. What are some ways to deal with a neighbor who is a gang stalker? How would it affect the legal system, and what can we do about them? I'm not going to read everything he's written, but I can post a link. It's quite long. I'll just read a couple of sentences, and then I want to discuss the law. A neighbor performing in this role is generally wittingly aiding and abetting corrupt public officials in criminal misuse of power and position. The United States Department of Justice, the DOJ, is specifically tasked with prosecution of said public officials and any and all whom wittingly aid and abet them in doing so. So I'm going to read the law. What is aid and abet? So I went to justia.com. It's a criminal law center. Aiding and abetting a crime and legal defenses. The inchoate crime of aiding and abetting applies to an individual who assists in a crime but does not commit the crime himself. This person is also known as an accessory to the crime, quote unquote. Aiding and abetting varies greatly by state, with some states varying the severity of the charge depending on the level of involvement of the accessory. Accessory in principle. Aiding and abetting requires the existence of both a principal, quote unquote, and an accessory, quote unquote. The principal is the person who is primarily responsible for the crime and who likely ultimately committed the crime. If two or more individuals are responsible for a crime, they can be charged as joint principals. The accessory is the person who assists with the crime but is not directly involved with its actual commission. Typically, the test for distinguishing between the two is whether the person directly contributed to the crime, a principal, or merely provided background help or assistance, an accessory. Principals and accessories. A principal is a person who directly committed the crime. I'll repeat that. The principal is a person who directly committed the crime. An accessory is a person who provided background assistance for the crime. A person who provided background assistance for the crime. Elements of aiding and abetting. A charge of aiding and abetting has 3 requirements. First, someone else must have committed a crime. Second, the defendant must have assisted that person in the commission of the crime. Third, the defendant must have had knowledge of that person's criminal intent or criminal plans. An individual will not be found guilty for accidentally assisting in a crime. For instance, if a man knows that his friends have committed a crime and are trying to escape, and he causes an accident in order to allow them to get away from the police, this could be aiding and abetting. However, if the same man is involved in an accident that allows burglars to get away from the police, but he has no knowledge of the burglary or the effect of his accident would have had, he cannot be charged with aiding and abetting. Okay, so the distinction is with having previous knowledge and not having previous knowledge. An accessory to a crime can have knowledge of a criminal intent before or after the commission of the crime. I'll read that again. An accessory to a crime can have knowledge of criminal intent before or after the commission of the crime. An individual who is aware of the crime before it occurs and gives assistance in preparation to commit the crime is called an accessory before the fact. If an individual only learns of the crime after it has taken place, but provides assistance in the aftermath of the crime, he is known as an accessory after the fact. Aiding and abetting elements. 1. Someone else committed the crime. 2. The defendant assisted that person. 3. The defendant knew of that person's intent. Okay? Those are the 3 elements of aiding and abetting. Someone else committed the crime, the defendant assisted that person, and the defendant knew of that person's intent. The types of actions that constitute assistance to a crime vary greatly. A person may provide advice, supplies, financial support, or engage in actions, such as acting as a lookout or driving the getaway car, where the assistance the accessory provides rises to the level of significant involvement in planning the crime. This can elevate the charge from aiding and abetting to conspiracy. Oh, we all know about the lookouts, right, guys? The people hanging out around your property watching out. They watch you come and go. And as they're watching, they're signaling to the other car that you're walking in one direction so they could jump on your property and enter your house. Sounds like a conspiracy to me. Sounds like aiding and abetting. Where someone else committed the crime, the defendant assisted that person, and the defendant knew of that person's intent. Okay? Punishment. In most states, accessories face lesser punishment than principals for crimes that are committed. However, other states consider accessories just as guilty as principals because they also intended for the crime to be committed. It is important to check the laws of your state in order to determine what punishments may apply. It is also important to note that even if a principal is not convicted of a crime, perhaps because of mistaken identity or other defense, the accessory may still be charged with aiding and abetting of a crime if the crime was committed and he assisted in the commission of that crime. Some states allow a defense of abandonment or withdrawal for an individual charged with aiding and abetting. For instance, in California, a defendant may be found not guilty if he can establish that he notified everyone else involved in the crime that he was no longer participating in the crime, and that he did everything reasonably within his power to prevent the crime from being committed, such as reporting the planned crime to the police. Yeah, well, that's not happening in any of our cases. That's certainly not happening. There's no abandonment or withdrawal for the individual charged with aiding and abetting. I don't see any of them contacting the police or notifying everybody involved that they're no longer involved. So I hope you found this interesting, folks, because I think that we need to arm ourselves with the legal process, the laws. These are methods for addressing the atrocities that are happening to us. Aiding and abetting of a crime is a crime. They are accessories and principals. The principal is the person who is primarily responsible for the crime and who likely ultimately committed the crime. If two or more individuals are responsible for a crime, they can be charged as joint principals. The accessory is the person who assists with the crime but is not directly involved with its actual commission. Typically, the test for distinguishing between the two is whether the person directly contributed to the crime as a principal or merely provided background help or assistance, which is the accessory. So going back to the Quora question, what are some ways to deal with a neighbor who is a gang stalker? How would it affect the legal system? And what can we do about them? Response: a neighbor performing in this role is generally wittingly aiding and abetting a corrupt public official or officials in criminal misuse of power and position. I'll repeat that. A neighbor performing in this role is generally wittingly aiding and abetting corrupt public officials in criminal misuse of power and position. The United States Department of Justice is specifically tasked with prosecution of said public officials and any and all whom wittingly aid and abet them in doing so. I rest my case. Exposing one criminal at a time. This is Lorraine Alternative Homesteading. Please hit the thumbs up. And I think I'm going to do a lot more research on aiding and abetting, because it's certainly happening to me here in rural Kentucky. And I know it's happening to you. I hope everybody's having a good night. I'm going to sign off for now. Post this. I hope you enjoy this beautiful little angel. This is a pan-painted original oil painting by Linda Russell.